Thank you everyone for showing up this morning. We want to try to do our best to make the most of your time here, and I'm really excited to be here. Let me start off with a quick introduction. My name is Gerald Taylor. I am the managing director for our consulting group strategy and operations organization. A little bit about myself. I'm a Sun Devil, and I'm a proud Sun Devil, which means that, Arizona State University and the College of Business is kind of like, the mob. Every time you get out, they try to pull you back in, and they got me twice. They got me as an undergrad where I majored in quantitative business analysis. And then in graduate school, I had the chance to go through a really good international and global business program where I went over to Europe and went to school at the Toulouse Business School. My profession is much like everyone here. I'm a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, and I specialize in operational excellence. And I've had the chance, and I've been fortunate to work in a variety of industries, including technology, healthcare, supply chain management, and finance. And what I want to talk with you about today is I just want to be able to accomplish a couple of things. And if I can get everybody to think in these terms and answer this question, is your organization truly getting the most productive use of its employees' time and talent? And if as a result of this conversation today, I can get you to think and ponder in that way, then really I've accomplished my goal. What we're going to talk about today is how you can blend lean management with a brand new technology called robotics process automation. And our agenda for today is really quite simple. Number one, I'm going to describe to you what robotic process automation is. I'll share with you how RPA works. We're going to discuss a little bit how RPA can fit in with a lean management system. And then, of course, we're going to give you a method to help you determine really, does RPA fit with your organization and your organization's lean management system? First and foremost, robotic process automation. It's a software-based technology, an inexpensive software-based technology that's really used to perform the functions that people perform. And it interacts with applications, and it interacts with platforms that happen across, the enterprise. And the reason that people use it is that it's a good solution for any type of repetitive, mundane, low value added work that a person performs. So for example, if you have a person that sits in between two systems, for example, they may go into a mainframe, cut and paste or grab some data, and then paste the data into a CRM like Salesforce. Robotic process automation can do that. If you're onboarding customers and you're in the onboarding process, you're taking information from what comes in from your digital world or your digital platform, and you're transferring that information again into another platform or a mainframe computer, then RPA can do that as well. The third thing that people like about robotic process automation and why it's so popular right now is because it becomes an attractive option to any type of lengthy system overhaul or major integration that happens within an organization. Now, what this slide shows, it represents really how popular robotic process automation is. We pulled these data from Google Trends. And what you see in this trend line is that for the past 3 years, the interest in robotic process automation has grown at about a 27% increase week over week for the past 3 years. And so everybody is really interested in, what this automation product can do. Also, some additional research from our analytics group has shown us that the popularity of this type of technology is going to grow at a compounded annual growth rate of 36.2% between now and 2023. And we'll get into the details as to why there's such a growth in this type of not only machine learning and artificial intelligence, but robotics process automation in particular. In this slide, the basic notion that we want to get across is that, what robots are now to manufacturing is what robotic process automation is going to be to the office environment. So now humans working side by side, whether it's on the manufacturing floor or in front office and back office operations, is now no longer anything of science fiction. It's going to be functioning in our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day activities. This slide shows some data from a recent study conducted at the Oxford Business School. It's called The Future of Employment. And really, the slide represents what proportion of the US employment population is going to be automated over the next decade. And what they've concluded is that 47% of the jobs that are happening and functioning right now across North America, but in the United States in particular, are going to be really automated out of existence, with the largest growth in automation heading towards office and administrative support jobs. They are expected to be automated out of existence over the next decade. You'll find that sales and sales-related jobs and sales support jobs are also going to be automated out of existence. And customer service and customer support jobs are also going to be digitized. And so the workforce of the future is going to be matched with the workplace of the future. And you're going to find that through automation, efficiencies are going to be gained and productivity is just going to explode. Okay, so your question is RPA going to be a good fit for my organization? And what role am I going to have as a continuous improvement professional or an operational excellence professional? What role am I going to have in this? Well, first and foremost, RPA is really well suited for environments where you have employees performing, or a proportion of their job they're performing in sub-optimized tasks. And so where they're performing these tasks of cutting and pasting data, or taking data and filling out form fields, or moving data from one database to another, where you find that occurring, those jobs are ripe for automation. In fact, you'll find that there's a certain portion of probably all of our jobs, anywhere between 10% and 30% of our jobs, in those mundane tasks. Processes that have high human error rates, or where you see human beings performing tasks over and over again and the law of diminishing marginal returns on quality kick in, then you'll find that those jobs are ripe for automation as well, and process improvements that are associated with it. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, where you find that employees are kind of like the traffic cop, or they sit in the intersections between interoperability from one old system to a new system, those jobs are very ripe for automation, where you can take employees that are in these mundane tasks and really free them from their tasks to work on higher priority activities. Here's some examples of robotics process automation and really the benefits that come from it. First and foremost, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, a bank really benefited from robotic process automation when it managed over 4,000 ATM disputes per month, and they were able to reduce their resolution or their turnaround times from 48 hours per dispute all the way down to 2 hours per dispute. In the lower left-hand corner, you'll find that an insurance company were able to reduce their documentation time from 16 to 20 minutes in document processing all the way down to 2 to 3 minutes. And what that did was that it released people from the prison of the mundane to work on higher value added priorities, and their overall productivity increased by 87.5%. Over in the upper right-hand corner, you'll find that a leading healthcare giant went through the process of validating certain procedures with insurance companies. And by doing so, by automating that process, they were able to reduce their resource costs by 50%. And then, of course, they achieved 100% accuracy in data verification and analysis, because the bots don't make, typing mistakes or typing errors. Okay, and they realized 60 to 90% quick verification response. And then we have a financial tech company that reduced their inspection time of their data files by more than 83%. And as a result, they enhanced their FTE requirements by 57%, where they were able to redeploy 57% of this particular function into different parts of the company and close out those open employee requisitions and retire the budget that was associated with it. Okay, and we see tremendous potential for robotic process automation in the healthcare system. They can do claims processing, discharging patients every day, prescription medications and distributions. HIPAA audits will be automated pretty soon, and denials and processing claims is going to be a huge value add for robotics process automation in healthcare. But the question is, really, now that we kind of understand what the technology is, how does it fit into a lean environment? We all know that as lean professionals, what we want to do is add value to our workplace, okay? And how we define value is the difference between the benefits that our customers or the organization's customers enjoy, less the organization's cost of production. And so what we want to do is we want to take the economic concept that is often viewed purely by the company's CFO and translate it into an organizational concept and really deliver value that everyone can respect. And so when we talk about value, sometimes it becomes a really slippery subject. And so we want to break it down. Now, this is from our main customers as a lean professional or a Lean Six Sigma professional. The CFO is always looking for, return on capital invested. And so if we were looking at this from their perspective, we know that our organization is profitable when our revenues exceeds our cost. But CFOs are, they're a little bit different. They're a little bit peculiar because they're trained by economics to think when you've got normal profit, you subtract it from what they call total profit, and what is left over is either an economic profit or an economic loss. And this sounds kind of strange, but this is how they think. And what we mean by that is in this example, say you were going to leave your company and start a coffee shop, and you invest about $200,000 of your personal wealth in the working capital of the coffee shop. And then let's say that year you earn about $280,000 in revenue. Now this is pretty good because what you clear, your return on that working capital that you invest is roughly $80,000. Now this is a beautiful thing. But then let's say, for example, that you decided not to open up the coffee shop. And if you didn't, then what you would get paid is $50,000. Okay, they view that as your opportunity cost. Now, what's left over is your economic profit. So CFOs see this return on your capital invested as the economic value add. So not only do you have to clear that $200,000 for your initial investment, to guarantee that you're profitable, but you also want to clear what you would have otherwise earned had you not invested in the coffee shop. And so this is how they actually see adding value, or what value is. Now, as a lean professional, we have to take that concept and translate it into our operations. And what we want to do is we want to say, if the customer is willing to pay for the products and services my organization offers, and that activity that everybody performs in my organization transform a good or a service for a downstream customer, and then of course the ultimate customer. And by doing so, we can generate a return on the capital that we invest on everybody in that organization performing their work, and that return is greater than the cost of capital that we pay to invest in it. Then we know that we are actually being productive in generating business. Okay. And if we can continue to do this over and over and over again, then we as lean professionals can really work on this little quotient that's in the bottom right-hand corner, where the value of the saleable goods that we offer is much greater than the working capital that we use, the labor, the equipment, the technology, and the cost of the material and the energy. And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. And so how does RPA fit into this? Okay. Now, I'd be a little bit remiss if I spoke to a group of folks from the American Society of Quality and didn't break down the fundamentals or talk a little bit about waste and how we try to enhance that quotient from the prior slide by focusing on waste in all its forms. But if we don't work in a manufacturing operation, what does waste actually look like? Well, let's take healthcare, for example. Healthcare, for anybody who's actually worked in healthcare over the past, let's say, 5 to 10 years, we know sometimes that working in healthcare can sometimes be working for the gang who can't shoot straight. Because oftentimes what we see are patients being readmitted. That's kind of like a warranty return that comes back, because if a patient is readmitted within a certain period of time, then that has, an impact on the revenue that we can go ahead and charge for. If we spend a lot of time wasted in clarifying physician orders, medication reconciliation, we find that sometimes there's wrong site surgery. We send patients through the same multiple tests in varying locations. We wait on, discharge orders for patients. There are a lot of insurance nuances and complex and redundant paperwork that happens. And then, of course, we've got significant amount of medication errors that come on. And we call this in healthcare the invisible thief, because, like the hidden factory, this happens below sea level. And oftentimes we just throw money and people at the problems. And so how does RPA work with Lean to help deliver value? And in this slide, what we're going to talk about is what we can do to determine where RPA can really help deliver value in a lean environment. And so the first step that we want to take as a lean professional is conduct our waste walk. Whether our waste walk is a direct waste walk in the operations, or whether we conduct a virtual waste walk online. And what we want to accomplish with this waste walk is that we want to create a straw model, or the current state of the process. Now, once we create this current state and we build this process as a result of the interviews that we have with folks that work in the process, we want to conduct what we refer to as a red flag analysis. And in this red flag analysis, we want to look for things that are ripe for automation. And so if we find during this analysis that we have repeating quality and accuracy checks, that may be ripe for automation. If we've got a lot of manual steps, that will be ripe for automation. If we find that we're duplicating work or duplicating reports either upstream or downstream, then that will also be ripe for automation. If we find ourselves collecting any non-relevant data, producing reports that are not read, those can be gleaned out of the process through, rationalizing and sanity checking. If we find a lot of redundant tasks, then those can be either ripe for automation or gleaned out of the process. If we find that we're collecting information in multiple formats, that can be gleaned out of the process, or it can be ripe for automation. And then if we find that we've got duplicate information at different steps, then we can capture those steps and either automate them out of the process or somehow re-engineer them into the process. Now, once we go ahead and we conduct our red flag analysis, the next thing that we want to do is conduct a virtual time and motion study. Now, the interesting thing about this is that we can either conduct a time and motion study sitting side by side with somebody working at the desktop, or we can do so in an environment like this with GoToMeeting or WebEx. And really what we want to do is observe, those tasks that fit into those red flags to determine if there's something that we can do to really automate them pretty much out of existence and release that person to perform more high value added activities. Then once we do that, what we want to do is calculate the minutes per task, translate that into a cost per minute, then a cost per task, and then multiply that times the total volume of work, and that will glean for us the real opportunity for automation. Our next step is to translate that opportunity for automation into a cost-benefit analysis. Once again, we know that our real customer for this is the chief financial officer. And that chief financial officer is consistently looking for a return on the capital that they invest, the working capital that they invest in the organization, and making sure that that return is greater than the company's cost of capital. And so we want to translate this opportunity for automation into a language that our CFO, can read and understand. And so we'll develop three financial models: a net present value model, the return on investment model, and then of course a payback period. And then once we review and examine the results of our work here, then we can ask ourselves the question, I think Shakespeare put it in the mouth of Hamlet, and that was to be or not to be. Should we automate this activity or should we not automate this activity? And once we find that out, then of course we can go ahead and make our decision and move forward. Now, as an example, what I've got for you is the financial tech company's actual RPA project. Now, in this company, we conducted a current state analysis. And what we found in the current state analysis is the normal mode of operation for this organization was firefighting. Okay, the upstream silos fail to account for the needs or the requirements of their downstream customers. And the process was really riddled with manual processing and inspection steps. And so the current state analysis, when we took a look at our patients and we wanted to assess the patient's vital signs, this is what we saw. Number one, in this process, there were 45 discrete activities that occurred, and they happened across 7 operating functions. There was an 84-day cycle time for onboarding and data transformation. And there were 14 handoffs that occurred between 5 different parties. And there were 48 sources of waste that were identified: manual steps, defects, rework, lack of standardization, repeating quality and accuracy checks, and everything that we found in that red flag analysis. And so this is what the Gemba walk actually revealed. Okay. Now, the next step they did was they took a look at the onboarding and the monthly data transformation steps. And what they found on a monthly basis is that there were 2,699 monthly file loads to transform that file into a final end product that were consumed by financial banks and institutions around the world. Okay. And each of these file loads were manually inspected. They were manually inspected for these attributes like record count that were in each file, the balances, the aging, and they looked for technical and non-conformances that happened in these files. And so as you can see, this was really a real manual operation. And after you go through a certain number of files, a certain person will probably have the law of diminishing returns will kick in, and things will just begin to fly by. And so you'll have a lot of inaccuracies in the final product that go out to customers and really can wreak havoc in the economy because it can affect decisions that are made for financing. Okay. They found that there were 235 monthly loading attempts that were counted as fallouts or errors. And there were 58% of monthly loading errors can be attributed to file formatting, coding, and related validation errors. Now, these were the errors that were actually caught, but there were also a number of errors because of the law of diminishing returns that were not caught. But from what we found, these are the percentages we were looking at. And we also found that the employees spent 69% of the time just on these, 9 or 10% of monthly loading errors. And so there was a significant amount of time spent not only on manually inspecting each file that came through, but also a significant amount of time just, correcting the errors and then reloading and retransforming the data files. Now, here are the results. After 17 weeks of streamlining and making improvements, what we found was that we were able to take 45 steps and reduce them to 10 engineering or business activities. We were able to reduce the 7 functions or restructure the organizations from 7 functions to 3. As a result, there was a reduction of handoffs from 8 handoffs between 3 parties from 14 handoffs between 5 parties. And then there was a reduction to an 11-day cycle time versus an 84-day cycle time. And then there were 48 sources of waste that were eliminated and brought down to 13 sources of waste. And the cherry on top was the implementation of the robotic process automation, where there was a 57% decrease in the needs for FTEs. Now, the interesting thing that happened here was when we went to speak with the company CFO, we told the CFO, hey, we've got some good news and we've got some good news. And they said, well, what's the good news? The good news is that, we've got a 57% reduction, in the FTEs that you need for this operation. And they said, great. And they said, well, what's the other good news? The other good news is that you can't fire anybody. And the CFO looked at us and said, what do you mean you can't fire anybody? I said, well, look, with the way that this technology works, it depends on the employee to be more forthcoming with everything that they do in their operation. Now, if employees know and understand that this technology is really going to automate them and send them to the unemployment line, you're hardly going to be able to expect employees to be completely forthcoming. And the technology that you deploy will be riddled with bugs, and really you won't receive the benefits. And so our suggestion would be to go ahead and take the employees and give them into open requisitions in the organization. Have them fill those open requisitions, and if you still have employees left over, then to upskill them and train them up, because their upskilling or their training is going to be paid by the automated improvements anyway, and then go ahead and transplant them in the organization someplace else. And then by doing so, you can start eliminating open requisitions completely around the company globally, and then taking the dollars that were allocated to those requisitions and just retire it back to retained earnings. And that's exactly what this company did. And so when you take a look at the cost benefit analysis that was related to this, as you can see here, they took the cost of the process reengineering, the cost of the development or the programming of the RPA, the licensing fees, for a total investment of about $34,000. Now that was offset against 5 FTEs at $16 per hour, so roughly $165,000 per year. And so that's the benefit that comes with it. And so we took the cash flow. The first cash flow at year 0 was a cash outlay of $34,000. We offset that against year 1, year 2, and year 3 of $165,000. And we generated a net present value calculation of about $378,000. Now, of course, we all know how to conduct a net present value analysis, and we know that if the NPV is 1 or greater, we're going to go ahead and move forward. It's in the interest of the company. But what we also did was we also calculated the return on capital invested and the payback period. And the payback period kind of illustrates, of course, how soon this organization will get paid back. And that really means something to the economic value analysis that the CFO often calculates, so the CFO can really value the company and go to Wall Street and say, this is what our company is really worth. But the most exciting thing to see is the actual RPA algorithm at work. So we've recorded an excerpt for your review. And so let me go ahead and turn the floor back to Ellen and to Manny and see if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Gerald. One of the first questions, and I think you talked about this, but you could repeat this, are bots examples of RPA?
Yes, in fact, bots is just a term that it's the short term or the nickname for the algorithms that are programmed into the RPA technology. And the thing is that the bots can actually begin to start thinking, and they become smarter every time they go through a routine. And so let's say that a bot goes through a routine, catches a mistake, and then errors over and brings the mistake or brings the error to your desk. You go ahead and correct the error at your desk, turn the bot back on. The bot takes that error and throws it into memory, and the next time that error occurs, the bot automatically handles it. Okay, so initially there's one programming that takes place, and then the bot begins to start, kind of like self-healing itself over time with any edits that you make.
That's incredible. Someone had a question about some of the cost calculations you did, some concern about your reference to revenue and profit. And then they were also asking about the cost for the coffee shop.
Okay. It's just a simple example that I want to do to illustrate what's referred to as economic value add. Okay. And in this, this evaluation, you've got this initial investment that you use for your working capital, for the operation of the coffee shop. And that working capital you leverage to generate $280,000 in revenue. Okay. Which is good because that takes care of your cost of goods sold, and it takes care of your operating expenses. And then what's left over, of course, is your profitability. And so that profitability is your return on the capital that you initially invested. Now, let's say that instead of actually opening up the coffee shop, what you did was you stayed at your job. And if you stayed at your job, you would have earned $50,000 in salary and benefits, total compensation. Okay, so economics would say, was your decision to open up the coffee shop a good decision? And in the final analysis, your decision was exactly a very good decision, because what you did was, through the use of your own capital and the use of your own human capital, you enhanced your own wealth to the tune of $30,000. And so now you've added economic value. And what you see, that $50,000 to a certain extent, that is, your cost of capital, or your opportunity cost of capital. And this is how the CFO actually sees, the business. They say that I can take the company's money or the shareholders' money, and I can either invest it in the business or the expansion of the business with additional products and services, or I can take this money and I can invest it in the stock market. And so the CFO says, in order to enhance my shareholders' value, where am I going to get the greater return? And so they say, I want to invest it in the business. And so if their return is greater than investing it any place else, then really, the economics of it is favorable. And then that's how share prices over the long term increases. And really, that's how the CFO is actually, incented and rewarded.
Great, thank you. And then we have something around the RPA software tools. There's several of them mentioned here: Blue Prism, UiPath. Do you recommend anyone in particular, or are there different tools that are more suited for certain tasks?
That's a very important question. Now, there are some applications that are out there that are more so adopted or accepted in certain industries. For example, if you work in the finance industry, where security is a major issue, then you will find that Blue Prism, UiPath, and Automation Anywhere are in high demand. Those are kind of like the standard applications that are used in those industries, and they've established a pretty good reputation. Now, interestingly enough, the RPA industry has only really been active for about the last, 4 years, or 5 years at the most. They've really been popular within the last 2 or 3 years. And so what you've seen is that other applications providers have really enhanced their offerings to really meet the same standards as Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, and UiPath. And so we're beginning to see the standardization of what the applications can do. And now each application is becoming a commodity in the marketplace. But the ones that you mentioned are the most popular in the healthcare industry and also in the finance industry.
Okay. And that's Blue Prism, UiPath, is that how you say that?
UiPath and
UiPath
Automation Anywhere.
Okay. How long does it take to program the bot on average?
Well, that's a very good question. It all depends. It depends on really how sophisticated the process is, or the work that you're trying to automate, and and the number of decisions that are made, and the number of if-thens that you program into it, and of course, what the scope of it is, how large the task is. Okay. Now, in the ones that we have defined for you, that you saw in this this presentation, in the current state analysis, well, it took us about like 3 to 4 weeks just to get through the current state analysis. Then, of course, in the actual programming of the bots, it took them about roughly 4 to 5 weeks per bot, and they did it all in parallel. They programmed like 4 bots. They did it in parallel, 4 to 5 weeks to go through the bots, and then there was a couple of weeks of actually, piloting the bots just to make sure that there weren't any bugs in it. But basically, that's what we were looking at that time.
Okay, thank you. And how does intelligence automation differ from RPA, or does it, I guess?
Well, artificial intelligence, what's used in automation is really, if you take a look at automation, it's built kind of like in 3 phases. The first phase is the easiest phase, and that's what RPA is. RPA will take simple steps and routine tasks and kind of just like program those simple steps to perform those routine tasks every day. So if you're onboarding a customer and you know what fields you're actually going to be transferring data from, where you're going to be taking, data and files from your digital source, and you're taking them and you're moving them over into a database, the bot can perform all of those tasks. Okay, so that's, the first step, just the routine task. Then when you want the bots to do some learning and make higher level decisions, then you'll kick in machine learning, where the bot actually begins to start learning from, any past errors or any past mistakes. And then when you want to perform some reasoning, then you get into artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. Artificial intelligence becomes pretty sophisticated, so you can take that part and just kind of move it out, because the artificial intelligence per se is not necessarily going to be what you're looking at if you're looking from a lean perspective, and you're looking not necessarily to solve problems, but just to perform the routine tasks that happen in sales support operations, back office operations, or that happen in customer service functions.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned an example of a copy and paste from Excel to a CRM system like Salesforce. How many of these copy and paste activities make sense before? In other words, I think, how many of these do you typically see before it makes sense to move to an RPA?
Your driver in those decisions are going to be, first and foremost, how long does it take to do that particular task? Whether it's 30 seconds to a minute, you want to really know how much time it takes to do that task. Then you want to download the cost of the employee into that time period, and then you want to multiply that times the volume of work that comes through that requires that task. Then once you do that, that's what your opportunity for automation is. Now, each little indiscriminate task may not seem like much of an effort, but then again, when you start linking them all together, they go from task to task to task to task. Now you've got a job. or now you've got the proportion of time that occupies your employee, and this is how much it costs. Now, the thing is that when you can go around the entire enterprise and do that, you begin to see and translate that into FTE requirements, and you begin to see how much of your FTE requirements are basically, kind of like downloaded into these tasks or occupied by these, menial tasks. And you begin to start saying to yourself, my people can be freed up to really do more high value added work. And so what I want to do is automate all those steps out of the system so my people can be free to really do things like product development, design work, interacting with customers, going out and surveying customers and understanding their needs and their attitudes and perceptions and translating them into critical to quality characteristics, and then making sure that you develop products and services that meet those critical to quality characteristics versus, sitting there and just, doing these mundane, tasks that can be automated out of existence.
Thank you. The next one is, what tools do you use to map out digital waste? Value stream maps are useful tools for plant operations, but I do not think they may not translate well to digital data collection reporting. How do you make certain? So in other words, are there other tools that you use to look at that?
Well, what I like using, I like getting really, really basic. Okay. So I will, just use a regular flow chart just to identify what the task is. Okay. And then along with that task, what I'll put on into a spreadsheet is for every task in that spreadsheet, I will put down on average how much time is spent performing that task. And so I'll develop a sample size of 30 to 60 tasks. The work itself of actually going through this cost benefit analysis is, rather mundane and routine, but you begin to start learning really how much of your employees' time is truly wasted on things that doesn't require them to think or to perform, higher level functions. And so for each step, I get a sample size of 30 to 60. And what I do is I just, I just get the mean, the median, and the mode, get all those levels of central tendencies, and I, try to approximate, how long it takes to perform that task. And then for each step that I identify on the process map, I've got a, corresponding step in the spreadsheet, and that's how I begin to start calculating it. And so it becomes really, really basic. Now, this is really important because you want to pair this with, your standard work document or a standard operating procedures document, because at some point in time, you're going to take that spreadsheet, you're going to take that, that process map, and then you're going to take the accompanying standard work document, and you're going to hand it to the programmer along with a recording of the tasks themselves. And so the programmer is going to watch the task on your WebEx recording. They're also going to coordinate that or see the corresponding steps in your process map. And then, of course, they're going to see how long it takes. And then that's going to be the basis upon which they perform, their programming and their development work.
All right, and we have time for one more question. Thank you. Should you automate a quote unquote bad process or wait until the process is optimized before automating? Can anything be learned from automating a quote unquote bad process before deploying to production?
Well, the only thing, in my opinion, and I'm sure with a lot of people that are listening, the only thing that we can learn from automating a bad process is what we've actually learned by actually deploying, system integrations into a bad process. What we do is we just, make a bad process. We try to make a bad process better, but we really make more headaches than we need to do. That's why we go through this step number 2, the red flag analysis. We want to make sure that we actually clean out the process and simplify the process and eliminate all the waste in the process before we actually begin to attempt any automations. And so as a lean professional, you still want to go through, your Kaizen events. You want to go through your plan, do, check, act to make sure you glean out all of the waste steps, the non-value activity steps that you can before you begin to looking at adopting, any types of automation.
All right, thank you very much. We have a couple more questions, but what I'll do for those of you who didn't get your questions answered is I will send those to Gerald and have him answer you individually. And I think a couple of people also asked for presentations. We can also make that available. And I want to thank you very much, Gerald, for this interesting presentation, really very informative. And remind all of you that we have a webinar scheduled in the Lean Enterprise Division the second Wednesday of every month at noon Central Time. Next month, we will have Bill Hathaway speaking from Morestream, and the topic is to be determined. I don't think you heard me at the beginning of this presentation, so I will repeat that you will get certification or RU credits sent to you about 24 hours after this webinar via email. So you will have those available to you to use. And with that, I'm going to sign off. My name is Ellen Ermer. I am chair of the Lean Enterprise Division webinars. If you have other ideas or thoughts for these webinars, please feel free to reach out to me, and we appreciate your time and attention today. And again, thank you so much, Gerald.
My pleasure.